Good evening. Welcome to Truth, Money, and Freedom. Today is Monday, February 11th, 2019, and we are looking at an article that was brought to our attention by American Man, and it is New York City Muslim Community Patrol now patrolling Muslim neighborhoods. And in this article, basically, it states that there are Muslim community patrols that look like patrol cars by the New York City Police Department, and also they have uniforms that make them look much like uniformed police officers. And apparently, what they do is they drive around in Muslim neighborhoods and make sure that the neighborhoods are Sharia compliant. So tonight we have with us 4 ounces, Conjecture, I Am Vessel, and yours truly, TimmyChonga, having a roundtable discussion about this article. Go ahead and chime in, guys. What are your thoughts on this?
This particular task force, from what I understand, is an extension of the New York City's government, in which it is enforcing religious law.
That is correct.
And as we learned with the Christian Baker case, the First Amendment applies to the states because of the 14th Amendment, otherwise known as the Incorporation Doctrine, which made the Bill of Rights apply to the states, not just the federal government, when previously it applied to the federal government because the United States was a decentralized autonomous system of states.
That's a very good point, Conjecture. I'm very glad you brought that up because basically this is basically not complying with the United States Constitution because it is government-based security patrol groups. And it happens, apparently, according to this article here, it actually happens with multiple groups here. It happens with Asians, it happens with Jews. They have their own security forces that apparently drive around and enforce their own religious, value systems on their people in the neighborhoods. And that's not what government's for, is it?
No, it is not, and it also is a, I'd have to say, especially malicious misallocation of resources.
Yeah,
Move to America to get away from their culture.
I would agree. That's a very bad reallocation of resources. 4 ounces. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Well, the first thing that goes through my mind is something along the lines of liability issues. I'm hoping all these different groups, uh, regardless of who they're involved with, I hope they all have good risk managers because they sound like, unless there's some tort situation in New York that I'm not familiar with, there's a huge can of worms here that could get opened up on any given day with anybody doing darn near anything that is subject to misinterpretation or incorrect interpretation or he said, she said, or whatever it is that ends up on somebody's cell phone video camera.
Well, also too, there's another question here. I'm going to bring in this part. It says basically these patrols are in Austria, Denmark, Sweden, the UK, Netherlands, and Germany. How is it that these things can be possibly compliant with their local laws? For instance, in Sharia law, you may not be able to do something, but the law of the land says yes, you can. So, I mean, how can these be reconciled, I wonder? Especially when the
Well,
state is actually funding this.
that's a good question. Um, if 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 they're adhering to Sharia law, and I'm not an expert on this in any way, shape, or form, but if they're adhering to Sharia law, then are they picking and choosing which laws they adhere to, kind of like the way the Obama administration did? Um, if Sharia law, if I understand it correctly, uh, women are basically property. Is that not correct?
I I think so. I'm not certainly I don't know everything about Muslim or Sharia law, but I do know that women are prohibited from driving, reading, getting education in many countries. I know that Saudi Arabia recently celebrated the fact that women can now drive. It just happened last year in
Right.
2018.
Right.
but I'm not sure they're allowed to go to college.
But don't
Uh,
we presently in the United States of America have two ladies serving in Congress that are Muslim?
I think so.
Are they married?
I think they are.
And if they're not married, they're still in their father's house, right? Um,
That,
how is it that they're allowed to function in this role?
that's a very good
Because
question.
they're property. So who really got elected? The ladies or their husbands or fathers? Now, I asked this question today, this very day. I asked this question to a white kid, a senior at a Catholic high school, and I asked him, how is it that a lady who is a Muslim, who, if I understand right, and I may not, is property, how is it that she can run for office and be in Congress in the United States? You should ask your history teacher that. And he looked at me, and I kid you not, this is a white kid in a Catholic high school, said to me, well, I'd get labeled a racist if I asked that question.
And he would be
This
right.
happened. This happened today, TC.
Hmm. Yep.
And I had no idea we were going to be talking about this tonight, but that happened today.
Yep. That's
And it was
pretty
in the same
amazing.
context of me explaining that we were talking about the Civil War wasn't about slavery. And he said, I agree, it wasn't about slavery. It was about economic issues, and there were a lot of other things that played into it. And I said, well, that's right. And before the Civil War, it was the United States of America are. And after the Civil War, it was the United States of America is. And those five letters in those two words there are huge in what's been going on in this country.
Yep. And you're right. I
The
mean,
incorporation,
go ahead, conjecture. I'm
the
sorry for cutting you
incorporation
off.
doctrine. Oh, I was going to say the incorporation doctrine comes from that era.
Yes, it does. And this is, actually quite disturbing when you think about it. I don't know enough about this to know that they're actually enforcing Sharia provisions, throughout these neighborhoods. I don't know.
Well,
But basically, the article suggests that that may be the case. Because that's what they're doing in many other countries. We've heard about these stories in the UK and in Germany. I'm sorry, 4 ounces. Go ahead.
but I'm still sitting here shaking my head because if Sharia law is going to be applicable in certain places in the United States,
Dearborn, Michigan.
then it's right. It's kind of like the camel
Yep.
nose under the tent, right? Isn't that the Middle Eastern proverb about how the camel gets his nose under and then eventually he's got his half his face under and then an ear goes under and before long the whole camel's in the tent.
Yep.
Okay, what I don't understand, and maybe I'm just a dinosaur, and that very well could be, but I got the impression this morning that the young man from the Catholic high school was almost insinuating that I was being a racist just for asking the question, and that turned that whole conversation into censorship. But anyway, uh, if if Sharia law is in place in Minnesota and in Michigan and in places in Oklahoma or someplace, before long it's in places in a lot of places, and I don't know why every lady in America that's worked so hard to be somebody isn't alarmed by this. How come the LBQs aren't just going crazy here
Yep.
because of what Sharia law would represent to them if it was actually the, the thing that the law of the land became
Yeah.
the law of the county that they were in, or in Californication or something. I don't know, but it seems to me that a lot more people ought to be upset about this. People who seem awful sensitive about this issue, that issue, whatever, are missing the target when it comes to things that really would make a huge difference in their life right away.
I agree. In fact, that brings up another question. Who sets the standard? Is it New York City? Is it New York City officials? Is it Muslims? Is it some kind of weird council of both of them merged together to decide what Sharia provisions need to be enforced by these community patrols. I mean, how does this work? Um, but apparently, the Muslims are not alone. The Asians have a safety patrol, and apparently, the Jewish enclave exists as well in New York City. And apparently, there
So
are
are we?
others. Go ahead.
So we're just talking an exponential increase in overall gang activity in the United States.
That's
Is
what
that
it
what it
seems
is?
like. It seems like mafias are forming. With basically with city's permission, especially in New York.
Do you
There.
mind? Do you mind if I give an anarchist perspective about the?
You go ahead, conjecture.
Oh, from my perspective, what the mafia represents another government that operates within the government. Well, I mean, within the government's domain, but covertly.
Okay, conjecture. You cut
Did you
out.
catch?
You cut out at the last part of that. Can you say that again?
The mafia operates as a government covertly.
Okay. All right. And hey,
That's what I was getting at.
okay, gotcha. I understand that too. And the fact that this may be in violation of the Constitution, the First Amendment, doesn't escape me either. And we've got Vessel with us as well, and I was wondering if you had something you'd like to add to the conversation here, Vessel.
Well, I'm just kind of trying to wrap my head around this whole law period. I don't know much about it, so I'm kind of looking into it.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't
It
really have much to say. Like I said, I'm still trying to read it right now.
okay, understood.
This is all new to me.
Yep. And yep, and apparently this is real. And like I said, it's not just the Muslims doing this. Apparently, there's an Asian safety patrol. We've heard nothing about them. And then we also have a Jewish enclave. And so apparently, there are lots of groups that actually have some kind of,
Yeah, it shows.
yeah.
That's what I'm
How
reading
many of
here.
them
Asia,
actually
Africa,
has?
and Europe.
Mm. Go ahead, conjecture.
Go on. I was but I was going to say, sort of cutting you off, Vessel. How many of these groups actually asked for these patrol committees, and how many were assigned to them? And is the city making special rules dictating what these groups are allowed to do? And do these groups have any input under the rules that they're following? I mean, sounds like a legislative body independent from the city body, in which is likely filled with unelected bureaucrats that get to decide how certain groups of people are allowed to live their lives, depending on where they live.
That's certainly how it seems. Without more information, I think the author of the article may be, basically kind of guessing on some of this as well. Certainly taking a few liberties. He even suggested in the article that one of the provisions that they may be looking at for violations of Sharia law is drinking alcohol, which is forbidden in the Islam faith, I believe. So making sure that people aren't drinking alcohol, but at the same time, under American law, if you're 21 years old, you get to drink. So once again,
Drinking alcohol publicly.
okay, gotcha. Well, drinking alcohol publicly, it could be that. Um, but at any rate, it is an interesting story, and it's something that I live in the middle of the country. I'm in Missouri. We don't have anything like this here, and it is an interesting story. And I thought that we'd all get together and have a chat about it. And well, I guess we'll just kind of have to see what comes of this, and see if it becomes a thing in other cities closer to us. How are these things formed? Who are the governing bodies over these things? I mean, like I said, it can't be the city, because you can't have basically a city enforcing laws based on faith. You can't do it. And if they have found a way to do it, I'd like to know what they did and how they did it. But it seems to me that this is unconstitutional. Conjecture so rightly brought up the 14th Amendment, which basically, ensures that the states have to, comply with the Constitution of the United States. So basically, the Constitution and the First Amendment say we can't be doing this. So, but at any rate, I'd like to wrap it up here at this point. But basically, if anyone who is watching this video sees any of these patrols in any of the cities that you live in, please leave a comment in the YouTube section here. And we'll, of course, link up this story to our YouTube video that we'll be leaving on YouTube. Um, but if anyone knows of any of this, it'd be very interesting to hear from you. So please do let us know. And I'd like to actually thank everyone for joining us tonight. 4 ounces, Conjecture, and Vessel, thank you very much for joining us this evening for this podcast and lending your perspective. And you guys all have a pleasant evening. And those of you out in YouTube land, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us. We hope you have a pleasant evening.